Hi there, and welcome to another interview, and slightly different to normal sort of success story interviews, but I feel this is a particularly important subject. So if you're interested in type 1 diabetes, what goes on in the pharmaceutical companies, what's happening, I've got a fabulous guest to talk to me today. So Alison, I just want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm excited to be here. Glad to be talking about this. Thank you.
It is interesting what we're going to talk about, and maybe it will shock some people. I really don't know. It all starts really with the fact that your daughter has type 1 diabetes. So just want to tell us a little bit how long she's had type 1.
Sure. So my daughter's 15. She's in 9th grade. She was diagnosed about 2.5 years ago on November 21st of 2021. It came out of the blue. We were very surprised. It was Thanksgiving weekend. We were eating at a restaurant. She was drinking a lot of water. Of course, as we look back, there were some signs leading up to it, but it was actually her 18-year-old sister who came up to me and said, "Mom, she's showing signs of type 1 diabetes." This daughter had a close friend with type 1, and we were in the hospital the next day, spent the next 3 days in the hospital, and that's kind of started our journey here.
That's really interesting. Just for those that might be sitting there thinking, wow, I've got daughters at this age. What did the 18-year-old spot? What was the things that she spotted that were signs?
So we were eating at a restaurant, and every time the attendant passed, they would refill her water, and we were just amazed. And then we went to a movie, and she had to leave several times to use the bathroom. And as we looked back, she had mentioned to me a time coming up to that she would take a water bottle to school and she would finish it within an hour or two, and she would start to ask, could she share her friends' water bottles? And I look back, and even the previous about 5 months, she had lost about 20 pounds. We thought, that age, 13, you expect them to kind of grow and stretch out. But in hindsight, there were signs.
Absolutely. Now, I want to just nail this. I know we just spoke before we came on. You don't want to talk about this too much, but people will say she lost 20 pounds at age 13. Was she still eating? Because this is something I think people don't understand.
Absolutely. She was eating and drinking a ton. So that's why I was a little confused. She, and then the one other sign we noticed, she's a tennis player, and she had been complaining of cramping in her legs, like Charlie horses that she had never had before. But the months leading up to that, she had been complaining about that also. But yes, absolutely. She'd been eating a lot, drinking a lot.
Yeah. And this is one thing I say when people talk about calories. I also say, well, a type 1 diabetic can eat tons and tons of calories, but will not put on weight and actually can lose quite a devastating amount of weight. There's not calories because it's all about the insulin. So that's why you're on, actually, to talk about insulin. I think we're going to assume that everybody knows what insulin does. I mean, I will do a 30-second thing about the fact it gets energy into the cell. And if you're type 1, you don't produce enough insulin. So you have a particular thing you want to talk about. Let's talk about that.
So when you have type 1 diabetes, you either use an insulin pump or you use a regimen of multiple daily injections. If you use an insulin pump, you just use fast-acting insulin. And if you decide to use multiple daily injections, you use a basal insulin that runs in the background and this fast-acting insulin. And I'm only talking about the basal insulin today. She has used a certain type of insulin, and I show the types right here. There's these 3 different types. Levemir is the type of insulin that she uses, or it's called Detamir. Levemir is the brand name, Detamir is the generic name, but there isn't a generic name available of this. Novo Nordisk is the only one that makes this insulin. And it's different than the other 2. My daughter originally used one of the Glargine insulins and then switched to a different one, and I'll explain a little bit more about the names, but we just found that this type of insulin was perfect for her. She did want to try an insulin pump, and I've got an example of what that looks like right here. She used one for 3 months, and we kind of dialed in things a few months after her diagnosis and figured out with some lifestyle changes and dietary changes and this insulin, we really got things figured out quite well. She's got good blood glucose control. So when we used the pump, we were able to get comparable good control during the week. But we found on the weekends, she's a tennis player and she likes to play in tennis tournaments, that it would be very difficult for us. A tennis tournament day can include 2 to 4 matches in various weather, and you never know how tough the match is going to be. And her blood glucose would go extra high, and we'd have to remove the pump and inject insulin anyway. So our lives are just simpler on a regimen of multiple daily doses using this basal insulin and fast-acting insulin.
Cool. So what is the difference then between the Levemir and other options? What is the biggest difference?
The number one difference is this type of insulin lasts about 14 hours. It depends on the dose. It depends on the person. But it's about 14 hours. The glargine insulins, I have these all bunched together because there are many available. There are biosimilars, which are basically generics. And then the third type is Tresiba, which is also produced by Novo Nordisk. And so I've got these 3 insulins. This one, Levemir, that I'm talking about, lasts about 14 hours. The glargine insulins last about 24 hours. And Tresiba, or Degludec, lasts about 42 hours. Novo Nordisk is the only company that makes 2 of the 3 basal insulins. So the biggest difference is that Levemir lasts a shorter amount of time, and I'll tell you why that's great. Some people would think, why wouldn't you want to take a shot and have it last longer? And that's our main point. When someone has rapidly or fluctuating basal insulin needs, so hormones are one driver of insulin need. So a woman with a menstrual cycle, as you know, has hormones that fluctuate. And teen boys and girls both have hormones that fluctuate. And as do pregnant women and athletes, their basal insulin needs fluctuate also. So the reason this is so great, my daughter can take a shot of this insulin and we can see within a few hours if it's right. And if she's running a little low, we can back off for the next dose. And if she's running a little high, we can increase it. That's part of the reason we get such great blood glucose control with her. We're always just kind of constantly noticing and adjusting, and it's perfect for that. The Tresiba or Degludec, if you make a change in this, you often don't see that change for several days. And that's just, we would be left with needing to take sugar every few hours or needing a shot of fast acting every few hours to keep that good blood glucose level. We like keeping it in a great range. It enables my daughter to be an athlete. She's had very little disruption to nearly daily tennis practices or matches. And we just have things dialed in, and this insulin is perfect. So that's the first difference. And then I'm going to get into a couple of other differences, if that's okay.
Please do.
Okay, the glargine insulins come by a lot of different names. So there's Lantus is one a lot of people have heard of. And there's also Tuheo is a U300. It's an extra strength. There's Semglee and Resvoglar and Basaglar, and there are more of these being developed right now. A lot of people do great on these. I'm not trying to put down any method of diabetes management. A lot of people love their insulin pumps. A lot of people do fabulous on Lantus or Semglee, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but I do need to bring up some of the differences. These insulins are in an acidic solution with a pH of 4. The other 2 have a pH of 7.4. So because of that, these insulins sting and burn upon injection. Some people get used to it, but we have a lot of reports of especially kids who will run and hide because they don't want their injection. Not because it hurts initially, but because once it's injected, it stings. Another potential of these insulins is for a Lantus low, and it's described in the Lantus product monograph. It actually says hypoglycemia can result from injection directly into a blood vessel. So these insulins react differently with the bloodstream, and they can produce an unpredictable hypoglycemic event. And it doesn't happen very often, but it happens enough that it's concerning, especially for people who have had it happen. So that's another drawback. One more drawback of these insulins, they have been shown to produce more weight gain than Levemir or Detamir. And this, we weren't even talking about this. We've started talking about this in November. We weren't talking about the weight gain piece until some physicians have started seeing it in their practice. People are already going off of Levemir because they can't get it. It's not under many prescription plans anymore. And they're noticing specifically in the adolescent population, as they're going off of this insulin, that they're showing more difficulty controlling their blood sugar, more episodes of hypoglycemia, and the unexpected finding has been weight gain. And if you do just a Google search, you'll find that it's been shown in randomized control studies that the glargine insulins produce more weight gain than Detamir. So those are some of the three differences between the three insulins.
Excellent. Now, Alison, that is really clear. Weight gain, the acid base causes stinging, more hypoglycemia potential. So everyone watching will think, well, just stick with the Levemir. But what's the problem with that answer?
So last March, Novo Nordisk said, okay, we're going to decrease the price of, we produce 2 basal insulins. So this one, we're going to decrease the price by 65%. But then they said that would take effect in January of this year. Then on November 8th, they said, actually, we're not going to produce this anymore. And they gave 3 reasons that I can talk about. But they basically said this will be discontinued by the end of 2024.
Well, what were the reasons?
So number 1, they said we have global manufacturing issues. Well, we have, a few weeks later, they spent $16.5 billion to increase capacity of Ozempic and Wegovy. So that's that point. Number 2, they've said decreasing patient coverage. So the last year we could get specific numbers just in the United States, and I wish I had worldwide statistics, but just in the United, and this discontinuation was just announced for the United States. It hasn't been announced for the world, but our concern is that it would follow soon after. So in the United States, in 2021, there were over 1 million people using Levemir, and that was over 5 million prescriptions, which was the 117th most popular drug in 2021, which qualifies as a blockbuster drug by most industry standards. So 3 short years ago, there were over 1 million individuals just in the United States using Levemir. There are less than that now. I don't have numbers, but most people have had this removed from their prescription plans in the United States, so they can't get it. Personally, we got a letter in November saying Levemir won't be covered anymore. So we called and we had it put back on our plan. A month later, I got another letter that said it's removed again from your plan. I called back, and this time they said, okay, fine, but you have to pay a premium. But I think a lot of people are just accepting, well, it's going to go away, so I've got to go on something else. So that's the second reason, the decreasing patient coverage. And that's a complicated issue. That's due partly to pharmacy benefit managers and the manufacturers and the insurance schemes. That's a whole nother topic that's difficult to understand, but that's their second reason. Number 3 is we are confident that patients in the U.S. will be able to find alternative treatments. And that's the point. That's my role that I'm trying to explain. The alternatives are not adequate. They are not the same. They would make management for my daughter and many others much more difficult. And they're saying this over and over again. I was part of a Fox News piece just on Friday, just a few days ago, and the reporter reached out to Novo Nordisk, and Novo Nordisk responded the same thing they've responded to me and other people. They're saying in the same words, the company suggested that patients switch to other basal insulin options, including but not limited to Basaglar, insulin degludec, insulin glargine U300, Lantus, Resvoglar, Semglee, Tuheo, and Tresiba. Well, that sounds like 8 options. They're listing all of these and this. So it would be like me coming to you saying, oh, you've got a headache. Take acetaminophen or Tylenol or extra strength Tylenol or Walmart brand Tylenol, all these options. And you're looking at me saying, wait, that's the same thing.
Welcome to the Alchemy of Natural Healing. I'm your host, Laurel Dewey. True healing is an alchemical process, meaning it must transform you on all levels, body, mind, and spirit. What affects one affects all 3. True healing is one of the hardest journeys you'll ever travel, but it's one of the most rewarding and fulfilling when you get to meet yourself for the first time. If you're ready to take that journey, let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is very frustrating because Your first point about the manufacturing issues, well, if they're spending 16.5 billion, they've got money. They've definitely got, what we all know, all pharmaceutical companies have a lot of money. And that doesn't really ring true for me. Decreasing patient coverage, that could be actually they're putting the cart before the horse there, because they're actively discouraging people from taking it up, and their prescriptions are being written to get people off. I'm sure there's many people that are a bit more or less social media savvy than yourself who are just accepting it. So I think there's million patients in the US alone. Well, that's still quite good. Like I say, that's about 5 million prescriptions per year, and I do think that is not going to be really true. I think they're sort of manipulating that to happen rather than it's the patients deciding not to do it. And again, you said about the alternatives. Well, they're just ducking the issue, really. So do you feel that you can accomplish something by pointing this out to everybody? Are you quite confident that spreading the word and making people aware of what's going on could actually make a difference? So what are you trying to accomplish? Absolutely.
I thank you for that question, because I do. People look at me and think, you're crazy. This has happened. So this has happened, and insulin has been discontinued. There have been 62 insulin discontinuations in the past several decades. We have a paper outlining each one. None of them for safety or effectiveness. We cannot lose another insulin. We just can't. This time, it's different. They didn't used to develop biosimilars or generics like they can now. The timing is different. I believe that Novo Nordisk has taken their attention off of insulin. Their company was built on insulin and was focused on insulin. In 2017, over 50% of their revenue was due to insulins as a whole. That has steadily declined. This past year, it was 20% and still on the decline. I think in this case, I do think they will come to want to help us with this and develop this and keep this going for a few more years so we can get a generic going. We've got a movement going. So the announcement came in March, and then I was just incredulous, talking to everyone I could talk to. And a suggestion was, well, we could start a petition. So I started a petition, and there's over 3,000 signatures on it on change.org. The comments on that are especially interesting, I think. People need this insulin. We rallied a group together and created the Alliance to Protect Insulin Choice. We're still just kind of getting this together, starting a Facebook page and Instagram. A few of us went to Washington, D.C. in February and met with the offices of 15 senators and 6 congressional representatives. That came about. I spent time on the phone with everyone I could think of. Novo Nordisk, the Food and Drug Administration, the World Health Organization. This insulin is on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines. There are just so many compelling reasons we can't be without this insulin. But they all pretty much said only our government leaders can help influence this. And I'm hoping others around the world will hear this also. I've got someone has connected with me from Australia, and she's been to her parliament there and has talked about this. I'm hoping more. If there's enough public outcry, I really think a change can happen here. And as I talked with the offices of our legislative representatives, many of them were on board and want to help. I went again in March and met with 15 new offices and 9 repeats. And just last week, there were 3 senators from the U.S. that sent a letter to Novo Nordisk with specific concerns about this discontinuation. It was Senators Shaheen and Senator Warren and Senator Warnock. And I'm so grateful but this was just step 1, right? We've got more to do, but sometimes you look at something and you think, this can't not happen. This has to happen. We cannot be left without this insulin. I could go on and on with stories that people have come to me and said, this is why I need this.
Yeah, and it is about health. And I love the fact that you're not being derogatory about everybody. You're just being rational and saying it's really important. I noticed you sort of referenced the FDA, and yes, the World Health Organization does have it on its list of essential medications. But I do think it's a bit of a cop-out when they say only the government can help, because I think we've learned in the last 4 years, especially, that WHO has a lot of clout, actually, and can get governments to do stuff. So I don't really go for that, to be honest. I think they could lean on the governments and get them to do something. You mentioned the petition, which I'll put a link in. If you could kindly sort of supply that, I'll put that in the description, because obviously 3,000 signatures is good, but we do want to get more. So you have the Alliance to Protect Insulin Choice. You said you got a Facebook page. And again, every link that you can give me, I will put in the description. Is there anything that the listeners or viewers, depending on whether they're on the audio podcast or the YouTube, is there anything they can do to help?
Yes. So number one, reach out to your representatives. If you live in the United States, everyone has 2 senators and 1 congressional representative, and it's just a matter of Googling them and a comment form will come up. Some people say, does it really make a difference? But I can say, as I visited with their offices, they said to me, this sounds important, but we need to hear from our constituents, and so it really matters. I wanted these 3 senators that got the thanks last week to hear from their constituents. And so I reached out, and I can't reach out to everyone. A lot of people aren't even on social media, but I actually have a niece that lives in Georgia. And I said, hey, can you, because you're a constituent of Senator Warnock, can you send a message and say thank you because a loved one or a cousin of mine needs this? And she reached out. And she said, yes, and I will reach out to my in-laws and my coworkers and my friends, and I will have them send a letter of thanks. And that meant so much to me because these senators are busy. They've got so much on their plate. And if they're hearing from people that are voting for them, it makes a difference. And around the world, it doesn't need to be just in the U.S. We need outcry from everywhere. So that's number one, if you could help with that. Number 2, connect with us. And we'll have links there. Our email is insulinchoice@gmail.com. We've got a Facebook page. Connect with us if you have any suggestions or if there are any certain ways you'd like to help. Also, signing the petition, and you can comment. That would be great. And, you could even, if you'd like, reach out to Novo Nordisk on your platform of choice. And just, I'm not expecting people to attack them, but maybe if they get a lot of feedback that says, hey, we've got loved ones, or I'm concerned about this situation, that will help.
Yeah, I'm gonna really emphasize that. It's not worth attacking them because that'll just go straight into the trash and won't be listened to. But if you've got reason to do this and you can do some logical arguments, then that's going to work. You see, I've got this from, when I put videos out, I get comments, the stupid ones that just sort of say, oh, what a load of BS, with no facts, nothing to back it up, or attack me personally because I'm talking about low carb or whatever. Doesn't make a dent into what I'm thinking about. But if someone has 3 or 4 really good points that maybe is a different way of looking at stuff, it makes you stop and listen and think, right, okay, I've got to address these points because they're good points, but they can be addressed. Or, wow, maybe I need to look into this further. And I think that's the best approach. So try not to be too vicious. I don't think there's any love of pharmaceutical companies. And I think, I think people know that I'm not a big fan of them. It is a profitable business. That's basically what it is. It is a business, but there are people suffering. And they are still going to be making money out of this. So if you can change their mind, sadly, one of the things I think would work is trying to make them look like good guys, and actually doing something and pretending it is just for health and it's not just about profits. But I do think, there's literally millions of people out there that are going to be suffering if this goes, and it's going to make a big hole in their life. So is there anything else? Have I covered everything, or do you want to bring up any other points?
Yeah, just a few more things. So I do think there's this idea, some physicians aren't even aware of how great Levemir is, how easily adjustable, how, it's the only one that can be diluted for infants and children. I just had a pilot reach out to me over the weekend that gave me a little video of how he needs it. He's a pilot, and this is perfect for him. I've had people from different walks of life. We also, if you're interested in hearing, we have a YouTube video with 10 parents and 8 adults saying why specifically this one is so necessary. Honestly, I even wonder if Novo Nordisk doesn't realize how great this insulin is. So it's been on patent. But they just said in a private letter to me and to some of the senators' offices I visited on March 22nd, they said, we will not assert a patent against a manufacturer, a biosimilar manufacturer. And I think there's been some question, well, why hasn't someone developed this already? They couldn't because it was on patent. But now they can, but the process will take several years. It takes for a company to start to produce something and invest in it and have it take at least 3 years to go through all the FDA well-established pathways. And this company, a company that makes this would be nervous. They would think, wait, what if in 3 years when we get done and we put all this investment in this, what if the patient base isn't there? And so that's why our specific ask of Novo Nordisk is to produce this for several more years until a biosimilar is widely available and to cooperate with that biosimilar manufacturer, make it easier. I do wish there are a lot of, again, physicians who aren't aware how great this is. And they say, just do one of the others. There's several of the Lantus biosimilars. And my point is to say, if my daughter is without this insulin, I have to have a real conversation with her and say, okay, look, our choices are this insulin that lasts in your system at least 42 hours, that will be difficult to adjust. And some people do experience side effects on this type of insulin specifically. They have upper respiratory side effects and nosebleeds. Some people literally cannot use this insulin. So we wouldn't have as good control. Or I can say to her, we can go to one of the glargine insulins. There might be some associated weight gain. We're worried about hypos from a Lantus low, and it will sting. Or we can go back to a pump, which is probably what she would choose. And again, I don't want to say anything bad about pumps. A lot of people get great control on pumps. We get great control anyway. And the fear for me, she loves playing tennis. But when you look at a high school athlete who's at a similar level of many of her peers, any complication you add, if they're feeling sick one day, any heaviness you add to that activity makes it more difficult to do, right? I really think if she uses the pump, I don't know if she would compete at her same level. And that's what makes me sad. We have a regimen right now where we have things dialed in. Her diabetes management, I'm not going to say it's easy. I mean, it's tricky, but we know what we're doing. And if we don't have the tools that we need to do this, it makes our life sincerely more difficult. So the thought that there have been 62 insulins, we came into this world just over 2 years ago, and the thought that there used to be many more options and people could choose, concentrations. And we all know that there was beef and pork insulin, and there's none of that available now. There was the excellent Lenti series, and that was discontinued in the early 2000s. There have been some great options that it's really a shame. And a lot of people say, well, now is a great time to have type 1. There's so much technology. And I would say, yeah, we love her continuous glucose monitor is so great. I can see where her blood sugar levels are, but technology sometimes fails. And we have such things dialed in with, I just think we can't ever think that technology will replace the basic shots. I mean, there are people that can't afford a pump. There are people, so let me tell you a quick story. I was in Washington, D.C., and I was talking to one of the legislative representatives, and she said, this was just in March, and she said, I just had a baby. I had gestational diabetes, and towards the end of my pregnancy, I needed insulin. And ideally, you want tight control your whole life, but when a woman is pregnant, there's a real emphasis for tight control for the health of the fetus. And they knew that she only needed insulin at night. She didn't need insulin during the day. And it's actually common for pregnant women to have differing basal needs the day versus the night. And you can see that Levemir is the only one that would allow for this. She said, my physician knew Levemir would be perfect. She said it was great. I took my shot of Levemir at night. It stayed effective throughout the night when I needed it. It wore off in the day when I did not need it. She said, I used Levemir throughout the end of my pregnancy. As soon as my baby was born, as soon as delivery, there's a drop in the insulin needs. She said, I didn't need it anymore. But if Levemir is not available, someone's going to have to take a longer lasting insulin that can think of that postpartum period when you're dealing with so much, the birth of a baby. You don't want to be dealing with insulin that's still hanging around in your system that you're having to figure out. So again, a lot of people think, why would you want an insulin that you have to take shots more frequently? And I would say, if you have excellent control and this enables you to be an athlete and do whatever you want, shots become not a big deal to a lot of people with type 1. Some people can't do it. And again, that's another reason why the pump is fabulous. But there are some that just want to go out, take a shot, and have it be good. And without Levemir, I'm frightened of what would happen. And so I just have to think positively. It's not that I'm just thinking positively. I just know in my gut, in my heart, something is going to happen that's going to work out. We are going to be able to keep this insulin available, because it's just not, the idea of so many people being affected by the loss of this insulin is too much for me to even comprehend.
Yeah, I can tell you're very passionate, and you're not just thinking of your daughter, you're thinking of other people, which is terrific. I am a specialist practitioner in obesity and diabetes, and I think people don't realise that you're fighting for everything. When continual glucose monitors first came out, doctors didn't want them in the hands of patients. They didn't want that. They didn't want glucose monitors. But if you fight for it, eventually, because it's good and it is going to make the management much easier, it's very difficult to stop the tsunami of demand, really. And I think that's one of the things, what you're saying, very convincing, compelling video from a pilot. I mean, you would not want a pilot having problem with their blood glucose. So things like that are really helpful, because that's somebody that's in control of like maybe 300 people's lives every time he flies or she flies. So whatever you've done today, I think you will get a sort of groundswell of support. I'm feeling your positivity. I love the fact that you've obviously researched this and you feel passionate about it. There will be people saying, what is your daughter eating? Is she very careful with her diet? Is she doing that sort of thing?
Yes. So after diagnosis, we were given the instruction, just eat the way you want and take it from there and dose accordingly. So the first several months, we worked hard. I consider myself a pretty bright person, and I thought, I can figure this out. I can do this. And so I would repeat the same meal, and I would carb count and weigh it. And I would sit and watch her blood glucose monitor wherever she was, at tennis, at school, and I would watch it go up and down. And it's a tough position for a parent or a caregiver to be in, because you think, I did everything right. And then you're kind of hitting your head against the wall saying, why didn't I get the results that I planned on? And so we started looking around and finding who out there is doing this, who is succeeding, who's doing great with their blood sugar, who are athletes, who are healthy and strong with type 1 diabetes. And we were connected with people, and not only online, we met them in person and talked and researched. And we learned that if we're eating foods that are lower in carbs, our chance of success is so much greater. And so that's just the way we've changed the way our family eats. We've all become healthier. I have 2 adult children who are out of the home, but they know that when we're together and we're home, this is how we eat. And I eat the same way, just I'm healthier. I can't ask my daughter to do something that I'm not doing, and that's good, because I know what tastes good, and we're eating great. We're eating fabulous food. In fact, the food that we eat looks similar to everybody else's. We eat spaghetti, but we use protein noodles that are lower in carb. We still eat tacos that are made with shells out of cheese, and we still eat lasagna that's made with egg life wraps instead of noodles. You figure out, we'll have roast and cauliflower mash for Sunday dinner instead of mashed potatoes. And to watch her blood sugar be at a great level, and it's not that big of a deal for her. Initially we would send food for her when she was going places, and now it's just, she'll get what she wants, or she doesn't mind, if they're all eating something she doesn't eat, she doesn't worry about it. She'll come home and get what she wants. We still have root beer floats. We just use ice cream that's, sugar-free, and you figure it out, but boy, it makes our lives a lot easier.
Excellent. Alison, thank you so much for your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, can't thank you enough. Thank you, Stephen.
Oh, I appreciate it. And we'll get those links in the description. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Your support means the absolute world to me. And if you're enjoying this show, I've got a small favour to ask you. I'd be incredibly grateful if you would consider becoming a supporter and make a small monthly donation. Your contribution will really help to improve the show. I'll be able to improve the software, maybe put a few more episodes out, and do many things that I'm hoping to do in the future. Do them a lot quicker. So, it's a small monthly contribution. You can cancel at any time, and the link is in the show notes. Thanks very much for listening.